right. Well, I think we'll work on the technical stuff, but we can go ahead and get started now that we've had more people filter through.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming to our refresher training, and welcome back to mapping. We're excited to be getting back out into the field here. So just a brief recap of what we're doing today. Today we'll just be running through technically module 1 and 2 of the Citizen Forester training, which will be covering tree assessments, also our new COVID-19 protocols, what we'll be instilling in the field to make sure that everybody is out there and gathering safely. If you have your Citizen Forester training module manual from the original trainings in person, you may want to grab them for today. We'll be kind of going off of the material that we've gone through in the training manual as a reference. If you don't have your manual or would like a copy of it, we can distribute them with a PDF after the training today. So feel free to request that in the chat if you would like another copy. And then tomorrow we'll also be gathering again at 10 o'clock on the same Zoom link to go over species identification and some changes to the data entry process. So make sure to join us back again tomorrow. That meeting will also be recorded on Zoom as well as today's. So just some housekeeping things. If you have questions throughout the training, feel free to add them anytime in the chat box, or if you would rather just ask them, feel free to unmute anytime and ask your questions. And like I just said before, the video will be recorded for future reference. Okay, so who we are, I'll start myself. I'm Morgan Luongo. I am the newest coordinator for the Citizen Forester program with Smart Trees Pacific. I'm going to be looking over most of the operation parts of the program, in addition to working with Shannon and Wei and Rachel. Rachel, I think you're here if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Rachel. I'm also a volunteer coordinator here with Smart Trees Pacific. I've been working with Smart Trees for a really long time now, almost 3.5 years, and some of you will know me as an intern. I started with them as an intern. And I just did want to take some time to announce that by the end of April, I'll actually be leaving our team here at Smart Trees Pacific, just because I have to, as many of you know, I'm in graduate school, so I have to focus on that while I wrap up my master's. But I just wanted to give a big mahalo nui for all of the awesome times we've had and shared over the past 3 years. I've had just the most wonderful time, and you guys have become a family to me, and I just love our volunteers, and I'm so excited to see how Morgan will take the program moving forward. And yeah, just wanted to say thank you for all the great times I've had.
Awesome, Rachel, thank you. Wei is with us also. He's also another consultant involved with the Citizen Forester program. Wei, would you like to introduce yourself also?
Sure. Hey, everyone. It's very nice to see all of you. And thank you for all the time you have given us. And I know all of you, so it's wonderful to see you guys here. I look forward to go out to the streets again and map some trees together. Thank you.
Great, Wei. And Shannon, that leaves you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for joining us today. I'm Shannon Rivera. For those who don't know me, I think I know pretty much everybody on the call today. Good to see your guys' faces. It's been a long time. I've been working with the Citizen Forester program since 2017, and happy to see it take all of the different twists and turns that it has over the last few years. And yeah, I'm excited. I think that this is a good opportunity to kind of refresh on trainings that maybe, you know, some of us have done in 2016, 17, and see what's new with the program, as well as kind of revamp and rejudge some of our trains of thinking before we get out in the field again, which we're excited to announce that we're working on when that's going to be. So looking forward to seeing people out in the field. I'll kind of take it on from here to start going over some of the other the modules and everything else that we're doing. So as we kind of, you know, recapping from the last time we've seen each other, 2019 was such a great year. We were getting the ball rolling and we were training a whole bunch of different cohorts and talking about expansions to different islands in different parts of the Pacific. And then 2020 slowed us down a bit, just like it slowed everything down a bit. But we do want to share a few things that still happened over the last year. If you guys are on our mailing list, which I'm pretty sure everybody is since you're here on our training now, we've been updating and keeping up with our newsletter, which doesn't necessarily have the tree news, but we are sharing stuff that our program is still working on. So we've been busy working full time through 2020, and it's still been a really great year. So we have Kubo interns that have been going out for the past few months. They're trained in their mapping in different communities, and we've been keeping you guys updated on that. Also wanted to mention a really cool expansion of the program with the Citizen Forester program partnering with Muliva Initiative, which is a group of really great teachers that have put together a curriculum based on our training to be able to incorporate what we do out in the field and with our volunteer program with students K through 12. So Andy is actually here, who is one of the teachers working on this project. So she's also trained as a Citizen Forester, but I think the refresher will help her get out of teacher brain and into Citizen Forester brain. But this is an exciting thing that we're hoping to pilot this year. So if you guys know of any teachers or, you know, work within school districts, I know we have a few educators in our community, definitely reach out to us about that. And you might have seen this as well, but we are super excited and super proud of this. We were nominated to receive this nomination in 2020, and we got this as a national award out of a lot of different programs. It's an honor award from the U.S. Forest Service for the program. And even though we have been slowed down quite a bit in 2020, this is recognition that didn't just happen from that year. It's been from all of the years that we've been in service. So that was a really exciting thing that we got recognition even during a really tough year. And if, you know, we don't have too much time today, but I, you know, would like to know, I'm sure we'll catch up once we're out in the field again, but if you've been doing anything specific over the last 12 months or not doing anything at all, feel free to jump into the chat, put what you're up to. We'd love to check out and see what our friends that we normally are mapping trees with, maybe you've taken up a new hobby or are doing something outside on your own. We'd love to hear about it. So definitely utilize the chat for that. And we'll move on to getting back into the Citizen Forester program. So we are actually going to be, it's not super interactive, but there are some things to kind of catch what we normally work out in the field. So have your chat box open and ready to fill in some answers. I know normally during our trainings we have a lot of people that want to shout out first. So if it's that you know, when we ask our questions, writing it into the chat's the easiest. But if you want to unmute and ask any questions, feel free to do that as well. I don't want to be the one talking today. All right, so jumping back into the Citizen Forester program, starting from day one. Just a reminder that it's a collaborative project. We have federal, state, city partners, nonprofit partners, and we are super lucky to be working with all of them. So federal level U.S. Forest Service has supported us since the beginning and are some of our largest advocates on a national level to keep this program rolling. At state level, Ka'ulunani Urban and Community Forestry Program, which is a part of DOFA. City is on board, they love the project, and we have a lot of nonprofit partners we work with, Smart Trees Pacific, that helps manage this program. So as I'm sure we've all gotten into those conversations of who do you work for, or, you know, what is this program a part of? And it's just a really great collaborative project that just keeps building on its partnerships as well. So we're really happy about that. and the objectives of this program. So far, we are tasked with developing an inventory, which we do really well, and also increasing community support. So obviously getting everybody on this call involved, but you are also our ambassadors out in the field to get other people up to date and aware of why we think it's so important that we need to not only map our trees, but care about them. So those were our two objectives. And the ultimate goal is really to empower community members, the whole community in general, to become forestry leaders in their communities. And I think a lot of our citizen foresters have already proven that. Case in point, Rachel, who started as a volunteer to intern to now working in the field. Morgan kind of took the similar path, and we have a lot of volunteers that are some of our Kupu interns that weren't thinking about forestry. I actually got an email from one of our first interns that said, because of this program, I decided to go into architecture, landscape architecture, to be able to bring more trees into urban development. So the program really is creating that workforce and those ambassadors on so many different levels. So it's pretty cool. And we work in Hawaii's urban forests, and this is kind of a first question, which everybody should get right. What trees do we work on? Do we work on every tree that we can find? We work trees in the cities, trees in public urban areas, parks, commercial, and residential areas. It's kind of a trick question, which I like to always fool people, but not seeing an active chat box. I know Rachel should know this, Wei should know this, Larry should know this. I'm gonna start calling you guys out. Just kidding, I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but trick question, it's actually BNC, right? So we're mapping trees in the city's right of way, which are trees in public urban areas, parks, commercial areas, residential streets. It's those trees that the city manages. So we've also kind of branched into new areas where we're talking with schools on their campuses that have private areas as well. But for our program, we focus primarily on the city's trees. And I also wanted to show you guys a map of the priority areas of where we're working, where we have worked, and the areas that we're going into currently. So this gives you kind of a visual representation of what's happening and what's to come. So the green, we have Kailua, Palolo, Ala Moana. Those are finished. Manoa is almost finished. Kaimuki is almost finished. Those are areas that we're continuing to work on. And currently our Kupu interns are working in Waimanalo and working in Kalihi as well, but just kind of a representation of this path that we are moving forward on. And we'd love to see some of these get done once it's safe to do so. Also, some really exciting expansions that we've mentioned for over a year now, but 2020 definitely slowed us down. Kauai, actually, we had a meeting this week about getting Kauai up and running as soon as it is safe to do so. So that'll be really exciting to get more ambassadors across our state, as well as Guam, which currently we have a volunteer coordinator that's on Guam that's currently recruiting volunteers for their program. So that's also really exciting. It's a collaborative project working with their urban and community forestry program. And it'll look a little bit different, and it's exciting to get more and more people involved. So it's great to see where it's going. All right, so after my updates, just a little bit of our modules. Today we're going to be covering module 1, more about the ambassador side of things, as well as module 2, which Morgan will be going over later in the session, which are the tree assessments, the kind of nuts and bolts of the program. So let's jump into it. So what I pulled from our module 1, we kind of go over everything which you guys are largely familiar with, but I do want to do some refreshers on when we interact with the community. So let's go ahead. All right, and the point, like a huge part of this program, some like it more than others. I think we all kind of get wrapped up in conversations we have when we meet people, but it is an important, fun part of the program, but we do want to make sure that everyone is comfortable with what they're sharing and also feeling safe when they're doing it. So in our larger training, we have 4 tips, and I'm going to focus largely on the 4th tip of practicing your pitch of what do you want people to know about trees? What do you specifically want to be your message when going out and sharing? Let's talk about that a little bit more. I think when we say that, I think we might all have kind of our tagline, trees are important because X, and that is, what I usually go to. That's my go-to, but it could change depending on your audience. So maybe you're talking to a resident, maybe you're talking to somebody visiting the islands, or a business owner. Homeowners might be different than residents that are, visiting a certain area of the island. So maybe start thinking about tuning into different messages depending on who you're talking to, because that will help reach them a little bit more. Okay, so I have an example. How would you answer differently if these two different folks ask the same kind of question? So when we have a business owner who's worried about his, he's on a busy street, but he's worried about parking, he wants more business, and that's his aspect. And then we have a homeowner with kids who's interested in safety and maybe health benefits, and busy streets with their kids. So they're asking, I've seen you in my neighborhood, why are you mapping trees? And you might have your one pitch of, XYZ, this is why we're doing it, but how would you answer differently depending on who you're talking to? So the question that I pose, as you guys are thinking about what are some of the benefits that the business owner might be interested in that you would want to pull up, because maybe he doesn't really care that, trees help erosion. That might not be something that you would want to throw out to him right away, or, but what could be? Feel free to share in the chat or unmute. I'll wait until I get at least one example. Decrease energy costs. Perfect. Yeah, Jade said they decrease energy costs. That's great, because maybe the business owner is getting billed depending on how much, AC they use or something like that. That's a great one. Keep adding in if you want to. Them putting up here, I put in that they increase foot traffic, which studies have proven that people spend more time in areas with trees. They spend more money in areas with trees. They reduce crime, they reduce noise, they decrease temperature. There's all of these kinds of things that, obviously you're not going to read them a list of that, but when you're in conversation with them, those might be points that you bring up versus another person. So let's get into our mom wondering about trees. What are some benefits that she might be interested in hearing? And they could overlap. So she definitely wouldn't really care if it increases foot traffic in her business areas. But she might care about Jade for the win. She says healthy air for her and her child, for sure. Shade, definitely. Cooler temperatures for playing outside. That's a huge one. Play areas. The urban heat island effect just decreases the temperature drastically. Awesome. Great examples. So I put in a lot of the same stuff that you just had. They also increase property values. So maybe they're, homeowners, which how would you know that? But they reduce pollution, definitely traffic. I put that in there. I'm glad you guys are hitting on the same one. Trees are actually known to slow traffic down, which if I was a parent, that would be what I would be really concerned about as well. So anyway, point of this being, if you're chatting with certain people, you don't have to, ask them, are you a homeowner or do you run a business? But you do start to kind of feel out that maybe certain people care about certain things than others. And how do we reach them to make sure that they understand why this is so important? And you guys have access to all of these different things if you want a refresher on, what trees are good for. We have that in your manual, so feel free to use all of the resources that we've shared if you want them. Again, we have a lot of really cool brochures on this, up-to-date research all the time we share on our Facebook about, all of the different studies that are being done to show the benefits of trees in cities. So it's great to know that, just because we're all tree nerds, but also when people have something to say about it, we can back it up with, I know trees are, maybe you think that they drop rubbish, but could you imagine if it wasn't there, how much hotter our streets would be, that kind of thing. All right, and I have one more kind of example. So how would you answer if you're approached, it's a resident in a neighborhood where you're mapping, He's asking you questions. He looks a little angry. He might be confrontational. And he's asking, a tree on my street is lifting the sidewalk. It drops leaves all over my yard. What do I do? Who should I call? So you have A, you say, I don't know, and you move on. Say, it's called Google, so use it, and you move on. Hopefully, yeah. And then C, which is my long convoluted answer. Jade, C, definitely. Meredith says, Division of Urban Forestry, which is great. Give them a number, which is what we have. We have pamphlets, right? You don't have to know the number, but you can say, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with this. I can understand that you're frustrated. I usually try and not say sorry because it kind of takes fault, but saying, I can't imagine that this is really difficult for you to deal with. We do have some numbers. They can try and help you out if you need to reach out to the city. But we actually work for a volunteer program, so maybe redirecting the question. We're volunteers with a volunteer program, just trying to see the benefits of our trees in our cities and move on. If it is a confrontational person, we're not asking you to battle them. Normally, I think giving them the brochure, being polite and courteous, and then even if you haven't finished that tree, maybe moving away from anybody that's confrontational, just so you're not getting into any kind of argument. And then they call the city and say, your boys in yellow are telling me that da-da-da-da-da, and then you're going, oh my gosh, what's happening? So anyway, that's my last example for that. Yeah, Jade put in, be understanding of their frustration, direct them to resources. I think that's really important that, not blowing off, why are you angry? It's a pretty tree, or, something like that. It's not rubbish, they're leaves, it's biodegradable, which is what I want to say. But being understanding and pointing them in the right direction, because maybe they'll go, wow, that person's really nice, or I wonder what they actually are doing, or maybe I shouldn't be so mad at my tree, or something like that. So I have a question in the chat before I move on. Can the city tell us what their maintenance plan is for their street trees? How often they clean streets, prune trees? Definitely. The city being our partner, they're super open with the management strategies that they have. So if that's a personal question, we can ask them about what their maintenance plan is, how often they clean the streets and prune the trees. I think it would be more difficult to try and explain that to a community member, but giving them a number and saying, you can ask the city, if this is a city-owned tree, you can ask them about their maintenance plan or their cleaning schedule or something like that. We don't have that information because we're volunteers, but they're more than happy. They're a partner of ours. They're more than happy to answer any questions you might have to help you with issues you have. And again, even if you do know that answer, it's better not to come from us and have them reach out to the programs and agencies that actually manage that. So it's not if we get something wrong. But to answer your question, Larry, I think that would actually be kind of cool to get that information. So we'll make a note of it. All right, so up on the screen now are just some frequently asked questions. We don't have to go over them all today, but when I first started going out and I'd hear some questions that I'm like, oh no, I need to kind of prep a response to that. I put those in here, so it's helpful to check back in on those and say, how would I answer? Because sometimes you kind of get deer in the headlights when someone asks you this really detailed questions of maybe pruning schedules, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And it's better to have a response rather than staring at them blankly and saying, I don't know, and running away, which I've done a few times too. All right, last reminders. You guys are great at this. We've never had any complaints about people being not professional, but just remember that you are representing the program when we're out. And now that there's more consciousness about interacting and going into new neighborhoods and entering places where people live, that we want to maintain that 6-foot distance, even if we have really friendly community members that want to follow us around and see what trees. Just being really cognizant that we are, especially when we're entering neighborhoods that aren't ours, we're keeping that distance. And reporting back. So you guys are also really great at this, and we've never had any issues. But if anything happens and maybe you're out with 3 people and something just kind of odd happened, even if it's kind of like a brush off and you're going, it wasn't a big deal, it was just, a kooky neighbor or something, it's always better just to let your team lead know, so we know. So if they do end up calling us, that we have all the information from you guys as well. So just making a note of that for your team leader. All right, so that's kind of my spiel for my interacting with the community, which you guys do so great. And I mostly take my cues of how to respond based on how you guys respond. So I always appreciate how well you do. And next, we're going to jump into module 2 for the remainder of the session today, so we can get a better hang on that. So Morgan will take on from here.
Okay, so moving on to tree assessments. Taking the tree assessments really is the foundation of the inventory and the data that we're collecting. So refreshing on this and making sure that we are up to speed about how to take certain measurements. We're not going to be going through the nitty-gritty of what it is, since most of you already have experience out in the field, but we'll just be reviewing some odd cases and scenarios where things might be questionable. So definitely feel free to ask questions as things come up, because there's definitely lots of trees out there that are not always the norm like we would like them to, but that's why we like them, because they're unique, right? So, okay, moving forward into stems. So when we're recording stems, we're really looking to see the trunk number. The differences that comes out of that is when we're dealing with branches. A lot of the times with low growing branches, we can mistake them as a multi-stem. So really the difference with the stems is they're a separate trunk to the tree and it is connected to its own root systems, where branches are going to be an attachment to the trunk that grows out of the individual trunk and root system. So a lot of the times with branches, when they're growing out of the trunk, we'll start to see what we call a branch collar come around the area of the branch. So that wrinkled circular indentation, I guess, around the branch is what we're going to be looking for to see if the extension of the trunk is indeed a stem or if it's a branch. So here's some examples. These two pictures are the same tree. Wanted to give a different perspective, since a lot of the times it is kind of hard to tell. This is an ironwood over in Waimanalo, but so given the pictures, we see here there's a fold. This isn't a branch collar, so, but the folds do come about from trees growing together. So looking at this, yes, these two trees have their own root system, and no, there is not a branch collar. Moving forward to another example, you guys want to list in the chat box how many stems that you think this tree might have. Just giving this one picture. It was kind of hard to tell these from the picture. It's really more helpful to look in person, but looking at them, again, this tree also has another fold. It's not really quite a branch collar because it's not circular. Kind of goes vertically down in between the two trees, and same in between this third one here. So again, these three trees have their own root system, and there is no branch collar present. So for this tree, it would be 3 stems. Okay, and this sad tree here has been pruned quite a bit, which is also an indicator of stems or branches. Even though the picture is a little difficult to tell right here, and you can't really see the root system, there is no separate root system between this one branch and the stem here. And you can kind of see that there is a branch collar, a little bit more circular, and you can see where this branch is coming right out of the stem. See, Larry has a question. So can some separate adjacent trees grow or fuse together? Yes, when you can kind of see that in, go back here. Yeah, the folds will come about when two trees grow together from the stems. A lot of times when you're seeing multi-stem trees, you're seeing them because they were pruned or damaged during growth or not maintained properly. So when the seeds are growing from the ground, they're growing independently instead of one solid, strong trunk. So that's where you're going to see them grow together and kind of fuse with age. A lot of times it's not the case. So when we're looking at stems, most of the time it is going to be a single stem, but there are definitely instances like the examples we just showed where you'll see multiple stems in a single tree, and that's when you would record them as a multi-stemmed tree. And always leave comments in the primary ID, the details of the tree number. That way, if you do have questions, we can go back and compare. Okay, so moving into tree height. This is clearly the height of the tree from the base of the trunk to the top of the crown, and there are several methods that we can use to find height. One of the methods is the stick method, where you would use a stick that is at least the length of your arm, and you would need to know your pace in order to figure out what the distance is. And if you want to brush up on your stick method techniques, we will be sending out a video. You can get it into the chat box or in our follow-up email. And so pace is, like I said, involved with checking height with the stick method. We also can do crown spread with pace. We'll be remeasuring pace when we're back out in the field. I'm sure it's been a year. If you remember your pace, awesome. If you feel like you've slowed down a little bit, that's fine too. We'll remeasure pace to see where things are at. Just a reminder with pace that when you are counting, that a pace measurement counts as every other step. So we'll count your pace per 100 feet and then divide to see how much each step covers in feet. Another way, the most common way to check height is with the hypsometer or the rangefinder. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit tricky, so we'll have time in the field to brush up on using that. There's also a how-to video like with the stick method that we'll be sending out if you want to just refresh on how to use the hypsometer. And this is an internal view of what you're going to be looking at when you do use the device. Just a reminder that the middle HGT feature is the mode that we're going to be using to do height. HOR, horizontal, is another feature that the hypsometer has where you can measure horizontal distance, which could also be good for measuring crown spread. But for height, you would shoot the bottom of the tree and then the top of the crown to be able to get that measurement. And just something to be aware of when you are using the hypsometer, it's working via a laser. So when you are hitting the bottom of the tree and then the top, just to be careful that you're not going to be shooting at something that isn't the top of the tree. If there's branches in the way or buildings nearby, the laser could pick up on that if you're not directly on the top of the tree, the point that you want to be measuring. So something to just be aware of to make sure that you're getting accurate measurements. Okay, so a little Q&A here. Height for palms is a little bit different than regular trees. So how do we measure the height of palm trees? Is it A, at the top of the tree, B, at the bottom of the leaf sheath, which is the part right where the fluffy part of the fronds meets the extended part of the stem, or at the bottom of the fronds, right where the seeds are growing? Anybody want to take a guess? No, okay. Well, it is not in between the fronds. Awesome, Jade. Yeah, it is C. And it also is not the top of the tree. When you're measuring tree height for palms, we're going to be measuring right at the bottom of the frond. So it really is just this height of the stem of the tree. Okay, so DSH. Okay, so what is DSH? DSH is an abbreviation for what it is. So when we're calculating DSH, it is the diameter of a tree at a standard height of 4.5 feet. Okay, so and diameter, you probably remember from school, is the distance from one point of the circle to the opposite end of the circle. We use a specialized tape that does that measurement for us, because we know when we're out in the field, we're measuring at 4.5 feet, what appears to be the circumference of the trunk, but because the tape does the measurement for us, the number that we're recording is already calculated to be the diameter. And another tip, also when you are measuring with that tape, sometimes you'll come to the point that in between two whole numbers. So if the measurement is coming up for less than half, it's 12.5. Well, 12.5 would be very fun, but in that case, you could round up. But say it was like 12 1/3 of a DSH measurement, then you can round down. Okay, so I'll just cover some unusual measurements, because a lot of times DSH can be taken in a variety of different places, depending on the shape of the tree. So here we have an example of a deformity or obstruction of a stem. And so we're gonna just review where would we measure. We have option A, right across the obstruction, that would be at 4.5 feet, or B, an area of the trunk that would best represent the diameter. Okay, so this would obviously be B, which would make more sense to get a better idea of what the DSH is of the tree. And then the comments, because we wouldn't be measuring at 4.5 feet, you can record at what height of the DSH that you're recording or taking that measurement. So any of these types of deformities would be like a healed wound, water sprouts that occur there, any kind of irregular growth or impalements in the trunk. Sometimes people leave weird things in there. So anything that would make the most sense. Again, so now branches that split below 4.5 feet, where would we measure them? Either at A, 4.5 feet, or B. You guys, and I'm in there too to put in some answers here. So start to get a little trickier. Awesome, Jade saying B. Yeah. So B is the right answer. We would again record the DSH at a lower height that best represents the diameter, and then just record it in the comments. Okay, so multi-stems. Again, so we have two stems that are split above 4.5 feet. We have the option of measuring each stem at 4.5 feet, or closer to the ground, where it would give a better idea of the diameter of a tree. What are you guys thinking? Okay, so multi-stem trees can be calculated depending on your desire, I guess, to do math. The more ideal way to calculate the DSH of a multi-stem tree would be to measure each trunk separately. Actually, there is a little bit of math involved. It is the preferred way to do it. Measuring at a somewhat accurate representation of DSH is also acceptable, but we really do prefer take that extra step to do some math. So the way we do that is by calculating the sum of the squares, which sounds a little technical, but bear with me, we'll do an example. Okay, so right here we have these two stem trees. The DSH you measure of the first stem is about 26, and then the stem of the second tree, the DSH is measuring about 17. So the way that I like to do that is just to do math in the corner of the data sheet where we're recording. You square both of those numbers, add those sums together, and then take the square root, and we would get our answer as 31. It would be good to see measuring the field, doing it this way versus measuring around the bottom if you know how to do the math version, just to compare the differences. But if you can do the math, we would prefer you include that in the inventory. Okay, so crown measurements. So when we're taking the crown spread of a tree, we're going to be measuring perpendicular lengths of the crown spread. So from drip line to drip line, or edge to edge of the tree, whatever the longest spread of the tree is, and then the complete opposite in like a 90-degree opposite part of the line that you just measured to be able to get the crown spread. And just to note that the crown spread is taken independently of where the trunk is. So if the trunk is all the way at one end of the crown, you would still measure the longest spread versus the cross section of that longest spread. So yeah, just to note, Shannon and Way's, I'm just seeing that with the DSH calculation, the phone's calculator is very helpful for doing that calculation, and Way's also said we do have a spreadsheet for that as well. So if you are having issues doing the math in the field, just recording those two measurements is something that us or the team leads can do after. Okay, so some challenges that we might see in the field for crown spread, if the crown exceeds past a fence or is on a busy street or is intermixed with canopies, those can be some tricky ones. We always want to act on the side of safety first, so please don't walk out into the middle of the street or into somebody else's property. If it's intermixed with canopies, and same with the other situations, just do your best to provide your best estimate by just adding on how many feet you think is in addition to the crown spread that you can't get over to measure. And back to the laser hypsometer, the rangefinder that we were talking about before can also be used as a horizontal distance. It's best to be used for measurements over 50 feet. So those huge monkey pods that we're inventorying, these are really in good use for that. And also if you are measuring crown spread that is across the street, and how you would do that, you would have one of your teammates either stand on the opposite side, and then you would just use the laser on the horizontal feature to measure where, how far away they are from you are. Okay, we touched on pacing a little bit before. In addition to height and the stick method, pacing probably is most commonly used for calculating crown spread. And same as before, you just start at one end of the drip line and walk to the other end and count every 2 steps is 1 pace. All right, so when you are measuring the crown ratio, which is the percent of the crown compared to the whole tree, these are some of the options that we work with, either 0%, 25, 33, 50, 67, or 75 or greater. When you're looking at the tree in its entirety, there's also another assessment that you can record at the same time. That way you're not walking back and forth. Does anybody remember what else that we can check when we're recording crown ratio? I think Larry knows. Let's see. Oops. Too many buttons here. Anybody remember what else you can measure with crown ratio? Height. Yeah, Larry, great. Awesome. Yeah, height's another really easy one because you're looking at the tree in its entirety. Okay, another trick that we have covered in some of the trainings before that you may or may not have been familiar with. Oh, I did flash the answer, my bad. Okay, well, so for crown ratio, a trick that we can use is with a shaka. So when looking at a shaka, you can kind of use your fingers for measuring either the halfway mark between the crown, a third of the crown, or a quarter. So when you hold a shaka up to a tree, kind of like in this example here, you can get an idea of where the crown ratio falls. So for this first one, this is greater than 75, looking at 50. And then for this baobab would be more like 25. Crown density is another assessment that we're looking at. Just a reminder that the leaf size doesn't actually have any relationship to this type of measurement. So we can have trees with really small leaves, but many of them that's causing little light to come through. The light is what we are looking for mostly with crown density. So when you're standing under the tree, you look up and then estimate how much of the sky, percentage-wise of the sky is visible. So more dense trees, like this first one, is going to be greater than 75. And something like the bottom, I think that's a monkey pod, is going to be closer to 25 to 50. And you can see a lot more light is coming through that bottom one. Okay, we run into some issues here when the trees are pruned in a really odd shape. What we're looking for here is more of the branch leaf density. I have a question, let's see. Should crown shyness be noted in percentages? Main characteristic of the tree is not necessarily that is missing density. I'm not too sure, Andrew, what you mean by crown shyness, but from what I understand, like if we're having parts of the tree that isn't growing at a certain time, we'll touch on deciduous tree growth in a minute. But when we're measuring trees, we're really just recording what we're seeing at the time of the measurement. So something like, right, yeah, don't count. Shyness there. So for these examples, the crown spread may or may not be calculated into this type of measurement. For a pruning like the after V pruning or the L pruning, the crown spread would be considered. But something like the side pruning, you're really just going to be looking at what is visible at that of the canopy that is presented at the time. So if what is there is dense, but we're missing half of the tree, you can still record the density as 75 or greater if that's what it's looking like from underneath. Okay, so moving into diebac. So diebac is going to be indicating a loss of moisture or any kind of environmental stress from the area where the tree is growing that would restrict any kind of water uptake or vascular disease in the tree. Dieback is not caused by natural leaf shedding. So anything like deciduous leaf loss is not the same as dieback, as seen with, we've seen a lot of times with shower trees when the shower trees start to lose their flowers. The flower loss is not dieback, it's just changes in seasonality, and it's not a sign of health issues with the trees. Dieback is really something that we're going to be looking at to see the health of the tree. Okay, so these are 3 examples. We'll go through each of them. This first one I think is a little bit tricky, but this tree was reported, I believe, in the winter time. And it has mostly seed pods, but not many leaves. So what would you call this tree for the percent of dieback. Yeah, so this one's actually only 5%. Because the seed pods are growing towards the tip of the tree. There's only a couple of areas up at the top here where there really isn't any kind of growth. So the tree does have growth in the rest of the canopy. Dieback will only be 5%, even though it looks like the crown is really weak. The density would be a lot less. Okay, so for 2, what are we thinking for dieback here? Any guesses in the chat? Feel free to take any guesses. Wild guesses count too. Yeah, 10. Yeah, Jade, 10%. Probably, it wouldn't quite be less than 5 because there are some areas that don't have any kind of growth. So this we would probably call 10%. Okay, and this last one here is looking more like 60. A lot of the edges of the trees here don't have any growth at all. There's a little bit on the top here, but the majority of the tree, this is definitely more than half of the canopy that is not showing any signs of growth. Okay, so we have a new feature in our tree plotter system for recording deciduous tree loss. A lot of the times, like this plumeria here, if we're measuring in the winter, it's going to look like it doesn't really have much of a crown density or canopy coverage. So what do we do to track that these trees are being evaluated as such? Because not all year is this plumeria going to look like this. But for some of the year, it will. So we added a new feature in Tree Plotter to mark if deciduous leaf loss is present at the time that you're mapping. So if you are mapping, record the tree as you see it. So a plumeria like this would probably have as 0 to 25% density, really small crown spread. You would record it like that, and then the team leaders can add into Tree Plotter that this tree also had deciduous leaf loss present. Okay, so deciduous or dieback? Any guesses what we think this one is? This tree is going to be looking a little bit more deciduous. What we're looking for when we come across trees like this is the season and the species type. Like I said, this isn't a shower tree, but shower trees we'll see during part of the season, they'll lose flowers. Same with plumerias. So being aware of species types that this is common with, and the season that it's in would be an indicator if the leaf loss is deciduous or not. Caroline, what is one tree variety to know whether deciduous or not is a tree variety? Do you mean like the species? For the tree variety, yeah, some species are deciduous or not. We can, this is a good point. Knowing those would be more helpful. We can create a list of trees that are more common to be deciduous and share those with the team leads. That way we know which ones we're looking for. Because there's probably a longer list than I know off the top of my head at the moment. So Okay, so this next example of deciduous or dieback. Anybody want to take a stab at what this sad little tree is looking like? Yeah, it is dieback, definitely. So here we're seeing there's no growth on the ends of the crown here, and we're looking for environmental factors that can be limiting nutrient transport. So not present in this photo, but sometimes it's common to see trees that are growing on the street or over a street. That part of the crown will not be getting the nutrients that the rest of the crown that is above grass will be getting because of the way the nutrients are transported into the root system. Shannon's making a note. We can go through common urban trees that are deciduous, but Hawaii makes it easier since many trees grow year round, even if they are part of deciduous. They are deciduous in other parts of the world. So yeah, a lot of trees that grow here could lose leaf coverage, but because we do have beautiful weather all year long, a lot more trees here tend to hold on to their leaves. But there are definitely some that we do come across in the winter that would lose some leaves because of their deciduous character. Okay, so for palms, touching on the crown ratio and density, there are some measurements that are always 0 to 25%. I kind of just gave it away, but if you remember, is it both? Is it one? What are we thinking? Yeah, Caroline, it is C. Unless it's clearly outside of the norm, sometimes we have palms that grow really, really tall. That would still be 0 to 25, but if we have new palm plantings where it's only maybe a foot in height, the majority of the tree is really canopy, you can adjust it based on what you're seeing in the field. Just leave a note because it is outside of our normal standard. Okay, so overall condition. Okay, so overall condition of the tree status. Most of the trees that we're recording are alive, thank goodness. But we do come across trees that are dead or stumps. And yes, we record stumps and dead trees. Anybody want to take a guess to why we would want to include those types of trees in our inventory? Yeah, maintenance to see the health of tree population. Now it's changing, definitely. Yeah, really for maintenance, but definitely it is good insight to seeing just change of tree health over time with our inventory. It's good to know where those dead trees or stumps would be, so we know what would need to be addressed. Okay, so when recording dead trees and stumps, yes, and for Shannon to plant, where to plant more trees in the future, absolutely. So when we're recording those, you want to give those dead trees and stumps a primary ID, but that is really it. They don't need measurements. You don't have to take DSH or height. The status of the tree instead of alive would be dead or stump. And the common name also would be dead or stump. If you see that it's a palm tree, or if it is a silver buttonwood, because all the other trees around it are silver buttonwoods and it kind of looks similar, you don't have to put the common name as what you think, or obviously it's noted to be what the tree was. Just for our inventory sake, just recording the tree as dead or stump is more efficient for calculating your eco benefits of the measurements that we're taking for these trees. And Caroline made a note, yes, an irate homeowner or business owner might be happy to have those replaced with a nice new tree. Definitely, we want to be seeing where those dead trees can be replaced with trees that are growing and benefiting our communities. Okay, so when we're talking about condition, we're breaking it down really to fair, well, good, fair, and poor. And how we are rating the condition of the tree is based on the canopy method. So we're looking mainly at the canopy characteristics of the tree, which include leaf color, leaf size, density, dieback of the branch tips, and shoot growth. So when we come across these kinds of issues, they kind of break down into a numeric standard. So we're looking for trees that have less than 5% defects in the crown, and we report those as good. Anything between 5 and 25% would be more like fair, and anything more than 25% would be considered poor. Something to note too when we are assessing condition of a tree is not considering any structural defects like cavities, decays, or wounds, even though that can affect the health of the tree. If it's not directly affecting the canopy, it would be something to note in the comments, but looking at the actual effects of the canopy is something that we are using in our assessments to determine the condition of the tree. Okay, so some Q&As again. We're going to evaluate what the condition is of this tree. This is a manila palm, standard density of 0 to 25%. Doesn't really look like there's any dieback, but we are noticing there's some discolored fronds there, some yellowing of the leaves. So considering what the canopy is looking like, what would you rate this tree to be for condition? Yellowing palms aren't all that common, but we do see them occasionally. Obviously, this was taken from one of our inventories. Interesting point, Caroline. Yeah, maybe a self-cleaning palm, the fronds are ready to drop. That is possible. It does look like the yellowing is for a good percentage of the tree though. So if it is, if it was a normal shedding of fronds, we probably would just see it in one. So I would actually call this tree fair because of the coloring of the leaves. It's definitely more than just 5% of discoloring. Probably hard to see on the slideshow here, but a good amount of these fronds here are discolored. Okay, here's another example of silver buttonwood. Again, sorry, hard to see with the two-dimensional pictures here, but the density of this tree is pretty light at 0 to 25. There's a good amount of dieback, about 10%, not too much though. And in the field, looking at this tree from the street view and from the sidewalk, you can see behind it, there's a huge fern tree on the right side. There was also another one on the left, which were kind of crowding over the top of the silver buttonwood. So any guesses on what this canopy would be rated as for condition? This would also be another fair, just because of the overcrowding of the big two fern trees behind it are causing some constriction to the canopy growth. We just actually rechecked this tree not that long ago, and there were other silver buttonwoods along the street that were growing much more vibrantly and healthy. So especially compared to the environment, this tree wasn't doing quite as good as its neighbors because of the surrounding competition for nutrients with the fern trees nearby. Okay, so comments. Touched on this a lot throughout going through the tree assessments. This is really helpful for maintenance, for us in our data management of the inventory, understanding why the measurements that we're taking are what they are, especially when they're outside of the norm. So they can be, comments can really be up to anything that you would think would be helpful for the records, indicating if there's large branches, unusual lean, deformities, anything that you found nearby the trunk or in the trunk, or anything that may need some type of maintenance attention, commenting when the height of where DSH is measured, Also, if residents leave a remark, if we're interacting with the community and they're like, I don't want this tree anymore, let's replace it, or they don't want it to be replaced, that would be something to include there. And any identification notes that would help to identify the location of the tree, especially if it's in a tight area where it would be hard to identify where the tree would be. Okay, which brings us to photos. Photos are very helpful also for identifying trees or coming down to documenting a problem. So you can see how that changes over time. Helping to identify a species is incredibly helpful. Taking pictures of anything special about the tree, from the flowers, the fruit, the bark, and the seeds. Clear pictures, especially of these types of components of the tree, are really helpful to be identifying the tree after we're in the field if we can't figure out what the tree species is while we're out there. Also, like I said, with location, especially in clustered areas, we find this a lot at beach parks if we're trying to do maintenance or rechecking a tree. It would be really helpful to have a picture of the tree so we know which one it is compared to the rest that are in a grove or a cluster of trees in a similar area. And location information, we're recording location information, we're looking from the perspective of maintenance workers. So really from the street point of view, not from the homeowners. You know, it can be confusing if you think that they're coming out of the house and is the tree on the right or the left. It's not from out of the house, it's from somebody driving up to the site and looking at the tree from the road. All right, so let's hop into our COVID-19 precautions. Before I move into this, anybody have any questions about tree assessment before we move on? Feel free to add them on, even if I'm going over COVID stuff, if you think about them along the way. Just wanted to open that up real quick before we head into our next topic. Okay, COVID-19 precautions, we've been dealing with most of these for the past year. There's nothing really too out of the norm of what we have been doing when we're out in public anyways, when we're volunteering with the Citizen Forester program. Cloth masks will be required for participating in CF activities. And we ask that you wash your hands or sanitize before and after mapping sessions. For obviously other general safe practices, if you don't feel well, please don't attend. We'll be around. There will always be chances to come back out when you're feeling better. We will be providing hand sanitizer and sanitary wipes to wipe down equipment, but feel free to bring your own as well. Okay, so for field safety practices, we will be distributing a COVID-19 waiver. Just saying that we agree to participate in the program. We agree to follow along with our guidelines. This will be something that will be handed out to the team leaders and distributed through the groups. So if you want to participate, you can turn in your COVID-19 waiver. Team leaders will make sure that all the equipment is wiped down prior and after use. And only one person should be touching equipment at a time. So if you're on Height and you're using the Hypsometer for the day, that will be your tool that you touch until we wipe it down and turn it back in. And always maintain 6 feet of distance when you can. Okay, and like we've also been practicing this year, just use common sense and be vigilant in taking precautions when you're working with people in a group. Even if you are not personally concerned with the virus, just be concerned and considerate of the other people around you that are concerned with maintaining social distancing and those types of precautions that come along with reducing the spread of the virus. Just to recover, things to bring from home, please bring your mask, sanitation materials if you would like to bring your own. Bring your mobile device with data capabilities if you are someone that enjoys plotting the trees in tree plotter when we're out in the field. Your sun protection, sunglasses, hats, sunscreen, etc. The sun does become pretty strong after 2 hours out in the field. And anything else you might need, like water, medication, snacks, or a backpack. Okay, and like we mentioned before, safety is always our first concern, whether it comes to COVID-19 or just mapping out in the community in general. We want to make sure that our volunteers are safe at all times. So just some things to consider when you're out in our urban streets. Just be aware of road construction, sidewalk closures, any weather limitations, neighborhood safety, and walkability of the areas. These are things that the team leaders usually review before we're going out into a certain area. But something also just for our volunteers to be aware of and to act accordingly depending on the obstacles that come into play when we're out there. All right, so that wraps up our training session for today for the most part. Just a reminder that tomorrow we will be going through species identification and data entry. Shannon will be leading us through a fun trivia game to brush up on which tree is which. And that will be at the same time again tomorrow on Zoom, same Zoom link. And yeah, if you guys are excited about getting back out into the field to map with us, please feel free to leave a note in chat box letting us know that you're interested. We're looking to be reopening probably sometime in April, depending on team leaders' availability. Kaneohe and Kamuki will be our groups to be restarting, but let us know if you are interested in restarting there or in another area if you're just ready to get back in the field. We want to know about it. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is on the screen here. And down below is also a link to our inventory if you want to take a look through there and see what things have been up to over this past year and throughout the program. So if you have any other questions, now will be an awesome time to ask them. If not, always reach out and leave a note in the chat box.
Yeah, thank you guys. We have about 15 minutes left that we can chat. I actually wanted to give some time to Andy, who's our teacher I mentioned earlier when we got started, who's helping us lead through the curriculum. So she's going to just give a quick overview on what we're doing with that, and then good to go. Go ahead, Andy.
Thanks, Shannon. So it's really a great refresher to just be in the presence of all you wonderful volunteers and just getting that information flowing back through my mind, because it's nice, been so focused on just the curriculum and how it works in school that now getting this jolt and processing how that's going to work, making this connection. So the idea would be that school partners, teachers can sign up to work with Citizen Forester program. My job is kind of to then, instead of it just being this sort of one-off, the volunteers come into school, they teach the kids how to do these things, really allowing it to be a long-term place-based project for the students at the schools. So whereas for example, when Morgan was sharing with us all of the all the questions and things, and I found myself even being like, oh, I don't know, I haven't spent a lot of time with this tree. I don't really know what its ano is. I don't know what its character is. I don't know, right, the seasons that it exists in. And so I think one of the biggest portions we were concerned about with students is making sure that that is at the foundation of this curriculum, is allowing the students to have consistent relationships with the trees that are around them, so that they can start to just be ma'ats of the things that they're seeing, so that they can see the changes over time, and sort of these foundational skills that really feed into this wonderful program that you all are a part of. So and also making it interdisciplinary, so all of the math, science, social studies, everybody is covered, and we're connecting it to standards so that teachers have an easier time convincing their principals that, hey, I got to take my kids outside again. It's not for play recess time, it is for learning. So that's kind of been our job. We're so excited about it. And we're going to be, as Shannon had mentioned earlier, we're going to be having a sort of an information session for teachers, with the hopes that we get the interest of a few teachers that want to actually jump on board with myself. I'm going to be kind of acting as a conduit between the Citizen Forester program and these teachers, so that you folks can focus on the trees where your expertise lies, and I can kind of focus on kind of nurturing and supporting that relationship with the teachers of how they can see the possibilities with this program and setting them up with really powerful learning experiences. So I wanted to drop a link to you if you yourself are a K-12 teacher, or if you know someone that's in your ohana or in your neighborhood, or just somebody that's a K-12 teacher that you're hoping to get an opportunity for them to work with this program with their students. We're going to host an information session, and I'm going to drop it right into there. And that's the registration. From that registration page, there's all kinds of other information that they are able to, and you guys can even look at as well. You can kind of get a sneak peek of what that curriculum is going to look like. It dives into history of how we got here, like why do different cultures have different relationships with trees? How does the host culture have a different relationship with trees than maybe an American kind of way of looking at trees? And yeah, so just, sorry, lots of rambling. Just go to that link. You can share it with any of your teacher friends. That'd be super helpful for us. Mahalo.
Thanks, Andy.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks,
and
Andy.
we can share that. We'll send out, I know we mentioned a lot in this. There's going to be a lot tomorrow. We'll send kind of a wrap-up email to all of our citizen foresters, even those who couldn't make it today. We'll include that in there because that is an exciting component. And we have volunteers from Boy Scouts to teachers to students to everybody under the sun is in this program. So happy to hear from it. Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left. Morgan and I are going to stay on and probably chat together. But if you guys want to unmute and chat yourselves, we're happy to do that. We have a few minutes.